I love the idea of the American dream, and that anyone can get a business, get an idea, and literally start a business tomorrow if they really want to, and go after that.
The capacity that you have tend to be very positive and passionate about it, and some people are like, oh no, I would never own a franchise, and I think like a lot of that probably comes just from lack of knowledge or misinformation or something like that.
The first step of the process, and we have a trademark service called the Franchise Blueprint, but this is basically the strategy, the strategic components to franchising, figuring out the blueprint for it. What are the franchise fees going to be, and royalties and territory structure? What should your training and support look like? Running 5-year financial models and cash flow projections to really validate the financial model and investment for a franchisee.
You said one of the things that has to be determined is this a viable franchise model? Like, will people want to franchise this? How would I know that?
It's a fair question, and we get asked that a lot. And like with all things, there's no guarantee if you...
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Dr. Tom DuFore. He's the founder and CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team, an award-winning consulting firm that helps entrepreneurs grow their businesses through franchising. He's also an author, entrepreneur, and franchise expert. We talked about this. I'll say doctor one time so that we make sure that everybody, you get the credit that you deserve. And then if we can keep it informal from there, that'll be great. Tom, thank you for being here. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm very excited for the conversation and looking forward to this. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, Jason. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and share a message with your audience.
Awesome. Well, let's start with your background. Tell us a bit of your story, what got you to where you are today, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. Well, I always like to start having spent my entire career in franchising. And for most people, when they start to think about their career, franchising is generally not one of those career paths that they set out to get into. And mine was no different. It was not something that I necessarily set out to say, boy, I'd love to be in franchising of all things. Even though we all are, most of us are customers of a franchise, at least on a weekly basis, monthly, or some of us, depending on frequency, maybe daily, if you're hitting your favorite fast food spot or sub sandwich chain that you really enjoy. But my pathway really started when I was in college, and I remember one or two of my professors, they said that they were in management consulting, and I thought that was the coolest thing. I had no idea what it meant, but I said, I think I want to do that. And so when I finished school, I was a business major and said I'd like to be in business management consultant, and went searching for those kinds of roles and ended up working at a consulting company that specialized in working with small to mid-sized businesses and helping them turn into a franchise organization. And so I fell in love with that. It really married these two things that I really enjoy and appreciate. I love the idea of the American dream, and that anyone can get a business, get an idea, and literally start a business tomorrow if they really want to, and go after that. And so I think that's amazing. And so you're helping these entrepreneurs in most cases that have created something new or interesting or a great business model, and now they're going to franchise it. And then it helps other budding entrepreneurs, and what I call them, with that these ultimately these people who become franchisees, they are entrepreneurs as well. And many of them would never have become an entrepreneur without franchising. And so I refer to franchising sometimes for those franchisees as a confidence elixir. And so I worked there, did that for several years. And as many consultants know, when you're doing a great job, you're getting job offers from your clients and others around, and had an opportunity to go work for a client for a few years and help them grow from a regional brand to a national brand, and knew that I would not own that business. And so I had a bit of that entrepreneurial entrepreneur bug, and had an opportunity to partner in with an old colleague of mine to join a firm. And so I did that for about 4 years. And after about 4 years of partnership, yeah, sometimes vision, values aren't as quite in sync as you'd like to think, and separated out and amicably. And that's when I started my current consulting company. Along the way, I've owned other franchises, started other businesses that have some have gone okay, some have failed, some have done better than others. But that's the I guess the long of the short story there.
Yeah. No, it is thank you for sharing that. It's an interesting space, and I feel like it's a space that has strong opinions, maybe. People that have worked in the capacity that you have tend to be very positive and passionate about it, and some people are like, "Oh no, I would never own a franchise." And I think like a lot of that probably comes just from lack of knowledge or misinformation or something like that. So I guess where I'm going with this is I would love to start with maybe a bit about why. Well, I want to talk about it from both sides because of your experience level, but I want to talk about why someone who owns a business might decide to become a franchisor, and also why a budding entrepreneur might choose a franchise to be a part of. So we can start with whichever one you think is most appropriate. This is your area of expertise, so maybe lead us down the path on one of those.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to start with a little bit of what you were talking about franchising having this unique vantage point in the entrepreneurship space. And some people from the outside looking in might look at a franchisee and say, "Are they really an entrepreneur? Really? Do they really run and operate their own business?" And the short answer is yes, they do. They're just following someone else's system or processes along the way. And to me, one of the data points that has really only over the last few months resonated deeply with me. I've been in franchising now over 22 years, and I have found in the United States are roughly called 36 million small businesses that exist. And out of that 35 or 36 million small businesses that exist in the United States, less than 1 million of those are franchised outlets. And so you think about the perspective of that. Okay, so it's 1/35th or 1/36th of all businesses across the country are franchised. Very, 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 very small percentage. And yet that small percentage has an outsized impact on the business community and on the small business world and entrepreneurship. And so I think that to me says a lot about the power of franchising and what it's capable of doing. So I just kind of use that as just a blanket statement to say, wow, that's pretty significant. And so let's talk about, well, I'll go down the trajectory or the pathway of starting with the entrepreneur that decides to franchise their business, why they might decide to do that. And then now this entrepreneur is franchised and now there's an opportunity available, and why someone might look at joining up with that system as a franchisee and starting down that pathway. So when someone owns a successful business and why they might look into franchising it, there are three main drivers why an owner would look to franchise their business. And I like alliteration, so they all start with M. But the first one is money. And money meaning when an owner franchises their business, someone else is investing into open the business. Someone else is tapping into their resources to do that. That's what the franchisee does. Instead of the owner having to fund every single location. And that's what happens in company-owned growth is the owner has to fund it some way, or they have to get a loan, or they have to find an investor, but it's single source funding. And all the liability falls back on the founder or the owner of the business. And franchising helps decentralize that. And the one rule of thumb to think about is if you wanted to open up 20 more locations or businesses of whatever, most people don't have enough money to open up the 20, but it's a lot easier to find 20 people that can afford to open one. Uh, and then that leads us to the second reason why someone would franchise, which is management. So even if you had enough money or to open up 20 more of whatever kind of business you might own, you have 20 qualified managers to plug into that. And for most, the answer is, well, no. I've got one or two qualified managers, and I'd have to go through a whole training and an onboarding process and so on to go through that. And managing those businesses. So franchising helps solve that management problem by having that vested owner that puts their own money up. They're much more likely to have a vested interest in the success of that operation. Therefore, whether they're maybe an absentee owner or an active owner operator, they have a vested interest in wanting to make sure that that location is operating and functioning and doing well. And then the third reason why an owner would look to franchise is to multiply. And franchising allows an owner just to grow faster. And while we see the headlines of a brand A, brand B, brand C that sells 100 franchises a year for so many years and so on, that's the exception. That's not the norm. The on average, an average franchise system will sell on average somewhere around about 9 franchises a year. And that's taking into account those that are selling 100 franchises plus a year and some that are selling 0 franchises a year, right? So it takes that into account. So that's the average and that someone would be looking at. But the multiply is most small businesses only ever open up 1 or 2 or maybe even 3. And so even if you just sold 1 franchise a year for 10 years, that truly is multiplying from where that owner originally started and what they're doing. So it's money, management, and multiply. Those are the 3 M's I like to look at, why an owner would look to franchise their business and expand. And then we look at, to answer the second part of that question, Jason, is start saying, well, why would someone look at buying a franchise? And what would someone want to do? And there tends to be an archetype of a franchise buyer for that conventional owner operator. So I'll talk about an owner operator versus more of an investor or an absentee or semi-absentee owner type model, because the whys for each of those is a little bit different. So the why behind a franchisee wanting, or someone wanting to buy a franchise, is largely, it's typically someone that's age, call it 40 to 60 years old. They've worked a corporate job for 15, 20, 25 years. And they've said, usually they say, I'm tired of working for someone else. I want to be my own boss. In fact, the data and resources out there show that the number one reason why someone actually looks to buy a franchise is because they want to be their own boss. So they want to be their own boss, but they don't want to take the time to figure everything else out, how to make it go. They don't want to figure out, they many times they don't even know what kind of business they want. They're like, I just know I want to be my own boss, and I don't know what kind of business I want to start. And most entrepreneurs, you're solving a problem. And so most entrepreneurs start a business, they see a problem and they look around and say, why isn't anyone solving this problem? And so they start a business to solve that problem. And then as they grow, they find success in that. And so franchisees very often say, well, I don't really know what I want. And so then they look around and they find something that fits maybe their lifestyle or their stage of life or the income they want to generate. But for most, it's really what is going to give them this work-life satisfaction that they get to choose now. They get to choose what they want to do. And then by buying into a franchise system, it's no guarantee that it's going to work. There's never any guarantee on this. But what most franchisees that I've spoken to. And by the way, I've owned several franchises myself. I've been a franchisee. I've owned independents. I've owned franchises and the like. And the one thing that I really liked about the franchises that I've purchased and run is that I didn't have to think about or figure out how to make this thing go. Someone had a plan and a roadmap for me they were industries I knew nothing about. I literally knew nothing about these industries. I mean, I've had a background in professional consulting and I understand sales and marketing, but I mean, one of them was in water restoration and restoration services. And I had no idea how to do any of that, but there was a plan and a process, and it showed here's the training you have to do and certifications you have to get, and here's how you build a customer base and all of the things that could I have figured it out? Sure. But would I have lasted long enough to have figured it out? I don't know. It remains to be seen. So the franchise, someone coming in, they tend to be a little bit older, a little more mature, saying, I don't want to waste time figuring it out. I've got a little bit more cash and resources. I'd rather spend a little more cash up front to save me the heartache on the back end of having to try to figure this out. So those tend to be some of the drivers. And then for others, they like the idea of being part of a brand or a system or a network where even if it's a small franchise system, you're still part of a network that has 20, 30, 40 franchises. The one system I joined, it had 30 franchises at the time. Another one had, I think it was 15 or 20 at the time. And it's nice having other owners that you can talk to. And the franchisor is great in helping train and support, but I think I don't even want to call it a secret. It's just kind of this hidden treasure. It's really a hidden treasure in franchising is the bond that you have with your other franchisees. It feels a little bit like a fraternity or a sorority. It's kind of like you've gone through this whole thing together and no one else quite understands what it's like unless you're in this group together. There really is this brotherhood type of a sentiment that exists within that. And so those are some reasons why someone would look to buy into a franchise. And I would say reasons why not, because I also think it can be dangerous for someone to see, oh, I want to get into running my own business, but should I really buy this franchise or should I start my own? For someone that really likes doing things their own way, likes to tinker with things, really likes to be the inventor or the creator, chances are you're not going to like franchising all that well. It's a framework, it's a system, it's a process. Most of that's been vetted and figured out. And yeah, there might be a little fine tuning along the way, depending on which franchise system you're buying into. But for the most part, the vast majority has been refined, developed, and your success in franchising as a franchisee is largely driven by how closely you follow the system that's been put in front of you. There have been several studies and research that's been done that show the closer a franchisee operates to the original model that's been taught by the franchisor, the more successful they tend to be comparatively to their peers within the same system. So they're looking at peer-to-peer within the same system. So if you overdo it or underdo it, a standard deviation either way, the business performs worse off. So the closer you are to following the program, the more likely you are to be in the top performer within your system. So anyway, and to me, that's part of why I think there are so many more independents, because a lot of people look at this and say, I want to do things my way. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I love independent businesses and entrepreneurs and finding the success they have. So, and then the second type of franchisee that buys into franchising, which is actually today, this investor type franchisee is about half of the franchise buyers today, or that purchase about half the franchise units that come out are these investor type franchises. And this is someone that's going to come in and maybe purchase 3 franchises, 5 franchises, or they might already own other businesses. And now they're saying, I'm an entrepreneur in this business, which, by the way, that's what I did. I owned I own my company, Big Sky Franchise Team. We help companies franchise their business. That's what we do. But I said, I want to diversify, but I don't know what to diversify in. So that's why I bought a franchise to help me diversify my business. And it was something where I didn't have the time or the interest in trying to figure out some new industry. So I viewed it really like an investment instead of, putting money in the stock market or into real estate. I said, okay, well, I want to invest in a business. That's what I'm interested in. And so these investors come in, and their why behind it is they want something where very often they just don't have to figure stuff out. That's the main thing that they like. They want to come in, have a system, be able to hire some managers or bring in minority partners that can help run and execute the day-to-day. And now they're diversifying their investment portfolio so that they're trying to hedge against maybe the business that they own, or maybe they have investments in the stock market already and retirement accounts in real estate. And they're saying, how else can I maybe diversify what I'm doing? And so that's why they start to look into franchising as a franchise investment. And more franchises today are open to these investor type of franchises, largely driven from the fact of what I mentioned earlier, that about half of franchise buyers coming through are looking to buy multi-units, looking to come in as more of an investor into this. So I know I've been talking a lot and sharing a lot of information, but just kind of going through that journey from the entrepreneur franchising their business all the way to selling the single unit to these multi-unit or investor type franchisees.
Are you planning a remodel or construction project? Overwhelmed by the process? Over budget? Extended timelines? Strained relationships? We are all too familiar. At Lark Construction Services, we help homeowners and business owners take control of their construction journey, from reviewing bids and contracts to catching red flags before they become costly mistakes. Our Clarity Audit is a one-on-one expert review of your plans, estimates, or current progress, giving you the peace of mind and a defined action plan to move forward with confidence. Don't let confusion lead to costly errors. Visit larkconstruction.com and schedule your free call today. Lark Construction Services, saving you time, money, and stress.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was great. Great kind of overview of all of it to establish a good understanding. I mean, a couple of really interesting things you said that I wanted to touch on. One is just that the numbers you mentioned, if there's 35, 36 million businesses and only 1 million of them are franchises, that kind of shocks me, because I think a lot of times the franchises have maybe, like you said, like the biggest impact. Like, those are the ones you talk about. Like you said, we visit, daily or weekly. It's like you see the McDonald's and the Starbucks and the list goes on and on. But ultimately, that's a very interesting statistic to me, and I think this ties into what you said about becoming a franchise, or franchising your business. That the management piece, and when you talk about growing a business, scaling a business, having, large success beyond just being like a solopreneur, a lot of that comes down to the systems and processes that you've put in place to create your own, sort of effective business model. And so then that number might speak to the fact that a lot of us don't ever actually get to that. Like, in a way, we might not get so systematized that we could make a franchise out of it. But also just proving the importance of that, right? Like, management becomes so important, and that process and that system. And you mentioned the people that stick to the process do the best, that become franchisees, and so it all just kind of circles back to the same thing. It's like, if you want to be a successful business owner, franchise or otherwise, even if you don't have a franchise, you really do want to build those systems and processes and have a way that your business functions well and efficiently. And so it's your kind of breakdown of all of that and all the different reasons and ways it ties in. To me, in a lot of ways, it all just comes back to that that important piece, which is the management and the process and the systems. And being a franchisor, being able to essentially, like you said, like reach scale by outsourcing some of that, like the management, someone who buys in is going to be a lot more bought in, committed to the process, to the success, if they have a piece of ownership. And some of the businesses, non-franchise businesses that have some of the most success, their employees, their higher level employees, have some level of equity. They have, like, there's a reason why. It's because it maybe drives a bit more of motivation in, kind of running it like or being a successful business. So you've kind of experienced it from all different angles. I just think, is what I'm saying make sense? Does it fit with what you have experienced in that space?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with identifying that it is systems. It's a systems driven, franchising is systems driven, but the same systems that make a franchise system successful, it's no different whether you're running a franchise system, you're a franchisee, or running an independent. One of the most famous small business books of all time is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And it's all about creating processes and systems, things that are replicable or repeatable, that are not necessarily dependent on, quote, a superstar running and operating the business. And for most businesses, they all have the same core functions that are needed. You have to have sales and marketing and operations, and you have to have manage your accounting and pay your invoices, right? And you have to get the work and then fulfill the work, or get a customer and then sell the good that you've promised to deliver, and then the administrative back end that comes along with that. And so one of the things I read, the E-Myth, oh goodness, maybe 20 some years ago, I read it, and then recently read it about a year or so ago, and it definitely holds up. And now being in franchising, realize that maybe the last 20 or 25% of the book talks about how great franchising is. And I thought, boy, this has been a great sales, or a great endorser of the franchise system or methodology, because that's really what it is. And even when you become a franchisor in today's world, a big buzzword in business is coaching. Become a coach, or be a coach, or hire a coach, and what have you. And really, that's what franchising is. You're essentially hiring a business coach, except all of the other businesses that are being coached are operating under the same brand name. And so that is where I think the outsized impact starts to come into play, because you have the same name operating in different cities and different areas around the country, sometimes around the world, or at least regionally. And you're all functioning and operating under the same brand, the same system. And so that's why, the quintessential example of why when you're on a road trip and you pull off an unknown road stop and you see a McDonald's and random, food joint, you go to a McDonald's because you know what you're going to get. Or you see a random, hotel, or you see a Holiday Inn. Chances are you're going to head to the Holiday Inn because you know what to expect when you go in there. There's a certain standard that's consistent. And that's one of the things I like about franchising. If you were to go to the top performer and the worst performer in a franchise system, the actual customer experience is going to be very, very similar between them. Now, how they run their business in totality is going to be vastly different, but the customer experience is generally very consistent within the franchise system. So, I think to me that's part of the outsized impact is the common brand and common system that has everyone operating within that. And then what I love is the local connection, because I know in my community, I have kids in school still, and the local franchisees, they're owned by local people whose kids also go to schools or are in the area. And so they sponsor events and they sponsor things. It's not, quote, big corporate sponsoring this. No. That's coming out of the pocketbook of the local owner here. It's so they're another local small business contributing to the community. So anyway, that's the other thing I like, is that the ownership is hyper local. Really kind of the difference between thinking about, your local city representatives. That if you live in a city or a village, you've got a city council that's probably made up largely of volunteers. They probably don't get paid for it in a small to mid-sized town or city. And comparing it to Congress, federal Congress, it's like, well, the local folks, them. They, you probably see them at the local little league baseball fields or high school football game, versus the federal stuff. It's so far removed. Or thinking of like the big corporation, you're so far disconnected from that owner. So that's one of the things I like about franchising, and one of the things I think we all like about just the local small business in general, that we're able to, we get to know, we know who that owner is or who their family is.
Yeah, that's a really great point that I bet. I mean, I won't speak for everyone, but I've never really thought about it from that perspective, that the franchise, when I see a franchise, and I mean, there are some franchises that are still owned by the corporation, right? I know that not every is, in fact, I'm pretty sure like I can't buy a McDonald's. I think there's like certain ones that we think of that are and you would know better. Maybe I'm wrong about McDonald's, but the point being, I don't know that I've thought about it from that, sort of local business type of perspective, but it is an important, and probably important for those franchisees to be involved in that way, to bring a little bit of awareness to it, because you might have some outside bias from people that are like, well, Tom Smith's hardware store, that's where I'm going to buy something rather than, this Home Depot. I'm using probably bad examples there, but like the point being, the recognition of that local ownership and still being a part of the community is a really important point that I think, like I said, I hadn't really thought too much about it.
Yeah, I mean, just by way of example of just that local ownership, it's again one of those. I don't want to say undervalued. It's just a lesser known or talked about piece of franchising. I think it's one of the greatest values to franchising is it's locally owned in most situations. And in the example of McDonald's that you were talking about, McDonald's is going through a big transition right now where they have a lot of legacy owners and old time owners that are selling off their locations. And most McDonald's, by the way, almost all of them are owned by a franchisee. It's not owned by corporate. Okay. So they are locally, in most instances, still locally owned and operated. And a lesser known piece about McDonald's is McDonald's franchisees are not allowed to own other types of food franchises. So they're only allowed to own a McDonald's. And the reason is they want them to be, focused on a McDonald's, where there are others where you can own multiple KFCs or Taco Bells or what have you, but in a McDonald's, it's a McDonald's. So I've seen this actually in some local McDonald's in our area, and I'd challenge your listeners to look around too when you're driving around. There are a lot of McDonald's that have signs that will be posted in the store or in front of their restaurants now that say under new ownership or new franchisee ownership, and it'll list somebody's name that owns it and, lives in this town, says, to really emphasize the point that it is locally owned and operated.
That's very cool. I like that a lot. I mean, because like I said, I hadn't thought about it, and I think that, that's an important piece to understand. Like, you can still be community oriented and buy a franchise. Like, you don't have to just start your own business to do that. So that is a great point. Tom, I want to ask you a bit about Big Sky specifically your business. So you, correct me if I'm wrong, you help people turn their business into a franchise. Is that, I'm describing
Yes,
that correctly?
that's exactly right. Correct.
How does that work? Tell us the process a little bit and kind of what your role is.
Sure. So, in franchising a business, one of the first things, a common question we get asked when we work with an entrepreneur or have an initial consultation is someone will say, well, how would I know if my business is franchisable? I want to grow. How do I even know or understand that? And there are three check boxes that we like to look at to say, well, essentially, do you kind of pass the smell test, for lack of a better description? And so we look to say, well, one, do you have a profitable prototype? Because if you're franchising, you want to have had some success in the business. Number two is this something that you can teach someone how to operate in a reasonable time period? And for a lot of entrepreneurs, they will say, well, sure, I can train them, but it's really, are you willing to? If you were to sell a franchise, are you willing to train them? And then the third thing we like to look at is, do you have a potential customer base on a national basis, preferably nationally, ideally internationally, and at minimum on a regional basis? Because if you're going to franchise, you'd want to be able to grow large enough that you could have enough franchises that it makes it's worth your while to invest the time and money to do it. And so if that's the case, and someone says, boy, yeah, I like this idea of franchising, but how do you franchise? What's the process? How do you go through that? And we have a 3-step process our clients go through, but whether someone does this on their own or figures out some other way to do it, or they work with a company like ours, these are the steps that I found over the years of doing this that are important for any business ought to be going through if they're going to franchise. The first step of the process, and we have a trademark service called the Franchise Blueprint, but this is basically the strategy, the strategic components to franchising, figuring out the blueprint for it. What are the franchise fees going to be, and royalties and territory structure? What should your training and support look like? Running 5-year financial models and cash flow projections to really validate the financial model and investment for a franchisee. So we want to look at and validate that model. And then for the franchisor, now that this entrepreneur is getting into a new business, we want to build out a 5-year financial model and cash flow projection for them. How many franchises do they need to sell to make this worthwhile? What kind of staff do they need to hire if they start expanding? How do you account for what we call the lag factor, which is from the time someone buys a franchise until the time they open for business. And depending on your system, that could be 18 months. It could be 3 months. Every system's a little bit different. So how do you account for that? And so that's the first step of our process. Essentially, boiling the main deliverable, it becomes a franchise business plan. And we call that the franchise blueprint along the way. The second step of the process is then the rest of the franchise documentation. So this is the legal documents. In franchising, it's called the Uniform Franchise Disclosure Document. And we refer and get our clients connected to a great franchise attorney that's going to help them through this process. Then building out a franchise manual. So entrepreneurs very often tend not to be detail-oriented people. They're great at vision and executing, but when it comes to documenting processes and things, they tend to find something else to occupy their time than starting to document that. And so that's why organizations like ours exist, is to help document that and put it in a manual. Then it's marketing and sales. How do you recruit and find franchises? Once the legal stuff's done and the manual's done and defining the business, now you have to recruit and find potential buyers. So we build out marketing plans for our clients and franchise brochures and websites and all kinds of things to help them go to market, and teach them with our franchise sales training workshop, where we teach them how to sell franchises and what the process looks like. And really, in my opinion, while we call it franchise sales, you really are just guiding someone through an educational process and getting them educated about the business that they're considering purchasing or investing into. That's really what you're doing along the way, and helping them determine, do I really see myself doing this? And if I do I really want to do it? So helping them go through that process. So that's our turnkey program. And for most of our clients, it takes about 6 months to go through that window. It could take a year, it could take 3 months. It just depends on the owner going through it.
Well, you answered my next question, because I was curious how long that process takes. How does someone, I mean, you said one of the things that has to be determined is this a viable franchise model? Like, will people want to franchise this? How would I know that? Like, I have a business and I understand, like, okay, we should be profitable, but how do you do market studies, or like, how do you figure out this would be good to turn into a franchise? I was going to say the rest of it's simple. It's not simple, but I guess it's simpler to understand. But I guess I'm curious how you would determine that for someone, or with your help, I guess.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and we get asked that a lot. And like with all things, there's no guarantee if you franchise your business that anyone would buy it, right? There's no certainty or guarantee behind that. But what I found in all my years of doing this is that if you go through the franchise process and then you stick with consistent marketing and follow up and trying new things, sales will happen. I've just seen it happen over and over and over and over again. And I used to, when I first started in franchising, I used to think, oh, well, is there really enough room for another pizza franchise? Don't we already have enough with Domino's and Pizza Hut and Little Caesars? And then all of a sudden, here comes Papa John's, and then here comes Marco's Pizza, and the next one on down the line, that keeps coming in. And you say, how can that be? How can there continue to be more? And part of it is to remember there are 35 or so million small businesses, and less than a million are franchised. So just by sake of that, in its very nature, means that there's lots of market share opportunity. So I don't have a great answer for that, other than if the core of the business is solid, it will work if you just stay with it. We actually have a free white paper called 9 Pitfalls to Avoid When Franchising Your Business. And it's 9pitfalls.com. And that gives someone a roadmap to say, well, here are things you can do or avoid to help prevent, to help ensure, I should say, finding some success, or narrowing your pathway to finding success in franchising. So one of the hard things, one of the common pitfalls is entrepreneurs only run marketing for 6 months and give up on it. And a franchise sale, the average sales cycle is about 7 months. That's a long sales cycle. And most owners are used to selling a product or a service that maybe costs $10 or even $100 or $500 or $1,000. They're not selling an investment that might be $250,000 or $1 million to open up whatever kind of business that they're running. Well, you're now asking a stranger to invest potentially $500,000 or $250,000 with you. That's a much bigger ask than having them purchase an item from your restaurant or hiring you to paint your house. That's a very different ask and expectation. So recognizing that it's a different sale is an important aspect of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good point. Well, just in the interest of time, I want to kind of shift gears. You mentioned some of the why behind why someone might franchise their business, or why you might become a franchisee. But the show is Know Your Why, so I have to ask you, Tom, what is your why? What's driving you, to continue continued success?
Yeah, I did a lot of soul searching maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and thought about this for about 6 months or a year and wrote and rewrote and dug deep and thought. I drove my wife crazy, by the way. Say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Am I getting closer? And my end result, where I ended up falling, was that my why is to inspire and foster greatness. And I've really found that it's multifaceted in that I really have this core belief that every one of us are designed to be great at whatever that happens to be. We all have that built within us. So if I feel compelled and motivated to want to help someone feel inspired or motivated to pursue their own greatness. And inspiration, though, is fleeting. It's you get a jolt, and it just is it's constantly deflating. So the foster is to then help build up and maintain that encouragement throughout to help someone find or pursue that greatness. And I love the pursuit because greatness is a pursuit. It's not about a destination; it's about the journey on the way to it. And you might find success along the way. You probably will. But the idea of it is a pursuit. And so for me, it's this inspire and foster greatness to help lead others in that way. And part of that is then for myself to say, well, I don't want to just be talking about it. I want to try and do my best to also be an example to say, how am I, if I'm going to be talking about this, I better be trying to live this. And so that is also part of a personal motivation too.
That's great. When people hear this and they want to connect with you, what is the best way for them to reach out?
Best place to go is just to my website, bigskyfranchise.com. That's bigskyfranchise.com. We have webinars, podcasts, tons of free info, over 600 pieces of content available, quizzes. So if anyone's just interested or in learning more, discovering or starting to investigate this idea of franchising, we have a wealth of resources, and they can schedule a free consultation, no obligation, with someone on our team just to have an initial conversation.
Awesome. Well, we'll get that in the show notes so people can find you. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on the show. This has been fantastic. Your description and kind of at a very understandable level on how franchising might work for someone who wants to franchise, someone who wants to buy a franchise. I've learned a lot. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate what you're doing and the information you share here, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Thank you. Folks listening, make sure you connect with Tom. We'll have everything listed in the show notes, especially if you're interested in the franchise world. Please like, rate, and review the show so we can continue to get great guests. And as always, thank you for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?